is underway to defuse the situation. Well, let's stay with that story. Let's speak to Getechew Reda, who is a spokesman for the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, the rebel forces that we've been reporting are now close to the capital, Addis Ababa. Thank you so much for being here on the BBC. I want to get your reaction, first of all, to what the Prime Minister has been saying in the last 24 hours, that he will bury his enemies with our blood and bones.
Well, we have seen this movie several times over. Abiy's stock in trade has always been vowing to bury his enemies. That would include people, that would include children. This time around, he's been making similar vows for 4 months now. We have been able to reverse whatever gains he had in Tigray, and now he did impose a deadly blockade on the people of Tigray, and we decided to do everything within our power to make sure that siege is broken.
I'll come back to that.
We continue to take up.
I'll come back to that siege.
And I can only say that Abiy is making the same vow, except that this time around he's not going to fool anyone.
Briefly on this point, you tweeted that the state of emergency that is imposed is cover to jail or kill Tigrayans at will. Is that what you think is happening when the government is talking about arresting friends of terrorists?
Exactly. He often doesn't mince his words. In fact, his supporters have been making it abundantly clear that the state of emergency is another smokescreen to kill and jail more Tigrayans, simply because they come from the wrong part of the country. They have nothing to do with our movements. They have nothing to do with supporting our movements. They've been plying their trade, doing everything they could to survive in Addis Ababa. They have been suffering in the hands of security forces. Now, the government, what is little left of the government, has instituted a state of emergency specifically to target Tigrayans. And they have been rounding them up by their thousands, and we have every reason to suspect that people, Tigrayans, would get killed, summarily executed here and there.
We've seen the rebels.
We'll have to do everything.
We've seen the rebels entering strategic towns on their way towards the capital. Now, the US Special Envoy has been urging the rebels a couple of days ago not to march on the capital. Can you give an assurance that the TPLF will not attempt to take the capital?
Well, it is not a question of taking the capital. We're not particularly interested in marching on the capital for the sake of seizing power. We are not interested in territorial ambitions. Our interest and our only objective is to make sure that Abiy does not continue to threaten our people anymore. If marching on Addis is what it takes to make sure the threat from Abiy is neutralized, then we will.
Sorry, the line was difficult to be clear on that. Were you saying that you will potentially go into the capital, or you give the assurance that you won't?
We will potentially enter the capital. For us, marching on the capital is not about taking over Addis Ababa and seizing power. It is about making sure that Abiy's threat of continued genocide on the people of Tigray doesn't exist anymore. So
you say that, though. You say that as justification, but the problem here is the Prime Minister already has urged people, called them to arms. If your fighters enter the capital as well, there is huge potential for terrible consequences, is there not?
Look, Abiy has been calling on people to carry machetes and fight our forces, despite repeated efforts by him to send human waves after waves. We have managed to target the ENDF, the regular army units, and spare the helpless civilians who have been press-ganged into fighting and a war that doesn't belong to them, and will continue to take appropriate measures to avoid the kind of carnage and bloodshed that he is trying to visit upon the people.
You say that and, of course, blame the government, but only yesterday the UN High Commission for Human Rights reported potential war crimes on both sides in this conflict. Do you accept your part, your culpability for some horrendous crimes that have been committed over the last 12 months?
Look, while we have always been clear on our position to to agree on an independent investigation for anything on any allegation that could be flung against us. We categorically reject the so-called finding of the UN Human Rights Commission, because it was done with an institution, an Ethiopian institution that was particularly interested in whitewashing the crimes of Abiy Ahmed. Otherwise, we are open for independent investigation.
Let me ask you about the humanitarian situation, because the UN have been reporting that no new aid has been able to get into Tigray since October the 18th, when the government resumed their airstrikes. But as well as what the government is doing, with your push to the south, the insecurity has also hampered the delivery of aid to thousands of people. Can you give any assurances on that, on the humanitarian side, that what you are doing is not making the situation worse?
In fact, let me tell you this. When we took over Kombolcha, we found out that there is a significant amount of food aid in warehouses that belong to WFP, OCHA, CRAs, and all those humanitarian agencies. So the first order of business for us was to make sure that these warehouses are secure, and we have communicated OCHA and other humanitarian agencies to resume their aid activities, and we'll extend whatever support is necessary to make sure that these UN agencies continue to carry out their activities as peacefully and as smoothly as they can. So yes, we will give assurances that they can continue to carry out their work unhindered. And of course, we owe it to our people to make sure that there is, in fact, this unfettered access to humanitarian aid that has been hampered by the government of Abiy Ahmed.
Well, we have to leave it there, but thanks very much for joining us here on BBC World News. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.